Well, I'm going to talk about something that was a lot of fun for me and that I enjoyed doing very much, even if it didn't pay any extra, except in the enjoyment of it, and that was being honored by getting to be the charge of fun night quite often at our mission meetings and our Thanksgiving retreats. This is a chance for the missionaries to let down their hair and to just have some fun with different skits or music or games, whatever they would like to do that was fun to them and entertaining to everybody else. And I don't remember when I got started, but I got to be chairman of that part of the activities pretty often, and I did enjoy it very much. I enjoyed trying to think up games and skits and participating in them and writing fun songs and seeing people having fun and trying to make some of the more serious minded ones have some fun or cut loose a little bit and know that missionaries are very human people and they have a good time with good clean fun. One of my times that I enjoyed very much was when I taught the whole mission group one night to sing what we called the old Siamese national anthem. Now this is a song that I learned before we ever got to Thailand, and I remember teaching it to the RA boys a few times in different places, but it seemed like our folks hadn't heard about it, so we worked on the words real carefully, one syllable at a time. It went O, Wa, Ta, Gu, Siam. And we said those over a few times till they remembered it, and then we started singing it to My Country 'Tis of Thee. O Watagu Siam, O Watagu Siam, O Watagu. Well, it took a little while, but not too long before folks began to realize how they were talking about themselves. And that seemed to break the ice that year pretty good. And then another game that was very informational and informative. I sent out some requests for people to write down anything special about themselves or unusual experience they'd had or accomplishments. And then when they sent them in to me, then when it came time to do it that night at Fun Night, I mixed them up and I would just read what they had done and see if anybody could figure out who it was. And we learned a lot of good things about each other, accomplishments. I know one of our ladies had won a track meet, Alabama statewide track meet, and that was Miss Pat Brown. And then some others had done some special things. I can't remember too many of the details. I had a couple of them because I asked, I said this fella had pastored 6 churches at one time. Well, nobody guessed that it was me, but I had a chance to brag on that a little bit. And then I can't remember all of those, but we had a lot of, I did so many fun nights, I can't remember the details of all of it. But we had some very interesting things that learned. And another one that I like to tell on myself, and then I'll move on to something else, but I said that this fella's, when they left this church, that the church was so distraught and so grief-stricken and so emotionally bothered and all of those bad things that it took them 3.5 days to get a new pastor. And that happened to us too. Of course, we had told them that we were getting appointed for the mission field and to go ahead and try to find a pastor, not wait for us to leave. And the old gentleman that they got was one was going to call before they called me, but he was not available, so I was kind of the second choice. But we had a good ministry there, and I was proud that they could have that continuation of the pastor, because we left on Monday morning and he started on Wednesday night, so I think that's a pretty good record. Okay, I remember one of the funniest fun night skits was done by a couple of our, I think they were journeymen or maybe they were MKs, I can't remember now, but it's just one that you may have seen on TV on the Carol Burnett show about the fellow that went to the dentist and he didn't want to get a shot, and the dentist was trying to get to him where he could stick him, and the guy knocked the dentist's arm and he stuck himself, and the medicine took immediate effect, and he went down in a heap on the floor from his own medicine. I think that was that little guy that played on Carol Burnett a lot that was so funny. And these fellows did a good job, and we all clapped and applauded. And one of the missionary kids, I think, had been studying German at ISB there in Bangkok, and he said, he said, Dankeschön, Krop, to the crowd. Well, I heard a good one that Jack Martin told. We kind of overheard this. This was at another meeting, but it was funny. He was up speaking, and he said, I don't like to brag, but he said, I've had a lot of people tell me that I speak Thai just like a Thai. And he said, I said, well, what Thai is that? And they said, Pon Tip. That was our Thai girl that won Miss Universe that had been coached up to speak some Thai. So he said that he spoke Thai just like Pon Tip. Well, let me see.
I've got two skits I want you to talk about.
Okay, fire away.
Mother Goose.
Okay.
And then the wedding ceremony at 1963 leprosy training camp, where that was in honor of the Hobbs wedding anniversary.
Okay, I'd forgotten what that was in honor of. I remember the ceremony. That's one of the many times that I got married. And I was the bride, though, that day, wasn't I?
Yes.
Is that the one? And I had a lovely outfit on. I remember I had a rubber blown up floating float thing around my head to hold down my veil. And I had a handsome husband, I think was a doctor even. And I had a angry father who had a shotgun, and a lovely pastor with a beautiful hat on. And she marched in first and got set up with her Bible and all. And when we got there in front of her to have the ceremony, I tried to change my mind, but my dad with that rifle had a hold of me and I couldn't get away, so I went ahead and got married anyhow. Well, sometime later, I forget what that was about. I had on one of Maxine's dresses one fun night, and I don't remember why I was dressed up. I guess just for fun. But let's see. The other one you asked me about, son, was
Mother Goose.
Oh yeah. Well, there's several Mother Goose. Was that the
radio show? The old radio show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we had our first our first mission meeting, most of the time we met at our Baptist camp, but before it was developed very well, our first year which was in the summer of 1959, because we got there late in 58. We met at a hotel down at the beach, and we were supposed to have our fun program was going to be in the morning. I don't know if we call it fun night or not. And we were the newest missionaries there, and we were trying to think up a skit. Well, I'd heard quite a few TV evangelists and radio preachers, and we actually joined a church when we first got married in Birmingham. We went with some neighbors that invited us, and found out that this fellow was he was good at promoting things, and he didn't take any salary, but he had two banners made. One was that he passed them out each Sunday to change it from one Sunday to the next. And one banner was for the best attendance in Sunday school, and the other banner was for the class that had the biggest offering. Well, his salary was not a set salary. It was 75% of the offerings. So he was real good at promoting giving, and we didn't stay there very long. We got into a more legitimate Baptist church. But anyhow, I had some training or knowledge, of certain kind of church services, so we concocted a service, a radio service, and I appointed myself to be the MC and gave myself the name Frank Friendly. Well, in addition to Frank Friendly, we had the Maybelle and Estelle. What was their last name? I can't remember. But Maybelle played the piano, and they both sang some. And we did I'll Fly Away in a very well done manner. And I remember when we did it that first time, I kind of flapped my wings a little bit. Well, about 6 months later, some of our missionary families that had been away on furlough came back, and we had a special meeting in Bangkok, and they wanted to hear the radio program again, so we did it, but I didn't flap my wings, and one of the MKs, little girls, started crying, and when I asked her about it after a while, she said, "Well, Uncle Bob, you didn't flap your wings tonight." That was Debbie Hill, by the way, if she's listening. Okay, back to the program. We had an evangelist named Donald Dill from Bangkok. And Frank Friendly, he was getting up to asking for the people to send in their offerings to help Brother Dill, who was having an awful time. He had a Mercedes-Benz, but it was kind of broken down. The air conditioner wasn't working. And so he was having to be in that terrible Thailand heat in his car without an air conditioner. And so he was suffering, as you can imagine, very greatly. And Frank Friendly was not getting a cut of the offering. I know that for sure because I wrote the plot. But anyhow, it was a pretty good and heart-rendering and tear-provoking speech that I made to, and Brother Dill, he didn't directly ask me to do that. He kind of hinted around a little bit, but he didn't really ask me straight out. So he wasn't, he didn't make up the request. I did that. That was one of my strong points at that time. But he did. He got up and preached a really good message on the Mother Goose rhymes. And I think that day he did the one about Little Miss Muffet, didn't he? And this poor little girl, all she had in her house was a tuffet, so she had to sit on it. There wasn't anything else to sit on. And this tuffet turned out to be really tough. It was hard, and she was just suffering with that hard seat she was trying to sit on, and on top of that, she had a spider web up in the top of her house, and that old spider was coming down and back up again, and Miss Muffet was watching that spider, and she was suffering from her sitting problems, and then being terrified and terrorized by that spider. And Brother Dill, you know, he knew how to put it on the line, and he didn't mince any words about her condition, her situation, her great need that she had for some kind of financial support. And so, and Brother Dill needed some help along with it. You know, if he was going to help her, he had to get the help from you radio listeners, you know, to help her. So I hope that when you turn off the radio, you will not forget that need and get your cash or your checks if you have a bank account, and get that sent in to us so we can pass it on. Brother Dill can get his car fixed out of it first, but because if he doesn't have an air conditioner, he won't probably live long enough to preach very much more here in Thailand. So he's going to take care of Miss Muffet and see that they fix that tuffet to be softer, and try to get rid of that spider that's been terrorizing all these days. Okay, well, we not only had a preacher, we had a testifier. And we had a testifier from overseas, I'm telling you, all the way from Taiwan and China. He's a missionary who's been there for many years. He speaks the Chinese language, and he speaks English pretty well. Yeah, he's pretty good in English. And so he's going to testify about how I got the victory over chewing gum. Well, I said something about this later at Thailand reunion one time, and I had to confess that I'd been chewing on chewing gum myself all the way down to the camp, but I did get rid of it before I started speaking. Okay, so we had a wonderful testimony, and then we closed out with, I forget what the hymn was, but Maybelle and Estelle just did a terrific job. Now remember, we'll be back on the air next week, so save up your money. We won't charge anything, but you can make a donation, and I hope Brother Dill's car will be running better, and he won't have to have anything fixed this time, and whichever Mother Goose girl or boy is in trouble, maybe we can send them a little bit of help. Now, Bob asked me about Mother Goose. At first I wondered if you were talking, son, about the Macy's parade that we had later on. Now, this is all our MKs that are grown up now were gone by the time we started this. This was a suggestion from Chuck and Jenny Garcia. They showed up down there as missionaries, you know, a while before we retired, and they were young people with some big ideas, and they asked us why we didn't have a Macy's parade on Thanksgiving Day at our Thanksgiving retreat. Well, nobody knew what the answer was because we didn't know why we hadn't been doing it, but we decided we'd start doing it. And at our campground, our Baptist camp had a driveway, because it was gravel, sand and gravel, but it went all around the camp, around the main meeting building, and then around the kitchen and the dining hall. So it made a nice circle, sort of a football-shaped drive. So we decided on their suggestion that we have a Macy's parade, and we asked for volunteers. And of course, since I was in charge of the fun night and all, I had to be in it for sure. And Maxine agreed to make a fool out of herself too. So we went ahead and got into it, maybe leading the parade. And we decided to go as Jack and Jill. At first, I thought my son was asking about that part of it, but I'll just throw this in for extra. And I mean, we looked the part. You can imagine Jill was so pretty and blonde, curly hair, ringlets down, and dressed in a pinafore. And I mean, she was really fixed up. And I had on my short blue shorts with my long legs, and oh, I had a bucket. I knew I had something in my hand because Jack and Jill, we didn't have a hill, but we acted like we were going up the hill. And we I carried the bucket around, and when we got about 2/3 of the way around, one of our missionary guys was out standing beside the building there making fun of us or acting like making funny sounds and gestures and all that. And so I just stepped over there real quick and threw that stuff in the bucket at him. And he started dodging and moving around trying to keep from getting wet. Of course, it was just paper we'd cut up, put in the bucket. So we had a pretty successful parade. We had several others that were in it and did different musical skits, but since we were leading the parade, I can't really remember what was going on behind us all the time. Well, we had 2 more years of that before we left the field. And the second year we got down to business with ours. We had a street preaching service, which some of the younger missionaries had not seen much of or been into, because when we were in New Orleans Seminary, we participated in those street services and kind of got the hang of it. So, and when we first moved out to the country in Thailand, this was our main way of trying to share the gospel. Had about 18 villages that I tried to get to every month. And we just, sometimes I went by myself, sometimes my family was with me, and other times some of the church members, the young people. And we'd sing a little bit, and of course everybody wanted to see what the big, tall, funny-looking Farang, or American, looked like, who was trying to sing Thai songs. And they would come out, and then we could put up some Bible pictures and preach to them. And unfortunately, when we said something about Jesus, they did not respond in any way. And afterwards, they were asking me, what is a Jesus Christ? I said, we've never heard that word before. And they were not trying to be funny. And a lot of them thought it was a new make of car or a movie star or a singer or something like that. So we wanted to do this street service, preaching service, just to let folks know how we had to do it to start with, and they might want to try it where they were if they wanted to, because we did it some in the Cornioke when they opened up there, in another place or two out in the country from the hills and so on. And we had a couple little girls of the MKs that held the song sheets up for us, and they held the pictures up, and Maxine had her accordion, and so we had a pretty good street service there. We shortened it down. We didn't want to take up the whole parade with that, but that was our second year. And then the third year, which was just about 2 weeks before we left to come on furlough or to retire, we had a real special show for them then. We did a Thailand hula dance. You couldn't call it Hawaiian for sure. And I don't know what the Thais called it, but it was some movement. And I thought about our first trip to Thailand on the ship. We stopped in Hawaii for overnight. And we had an agricultural missionary with us from Florida. He and his wife were going out to the Philippines. And his wife was telling us on the ship one day, she said, my husband got this figured out. He said, those girls are not doing anything but putting one kind of crop on top and one on the bottom, and then they start rotating the crops. Well, I thought, that's a pretty good description of it. So we tried to rotate them. Maxine rotated pretty good, but, you know, I was kind of back and forth more than I was going around. But we were good sports. That's one thing we always tried to be, was good sports. So I hope they're still having them. You know, we've been gone from the field quite a while. And I always had fun. The last thing I'm going to tell is it's funny, and it's a little bit instructive as well. And I was not only in charge of Fun Night in 1975, I was in charge of the whole caboose. I was in charge of the committee. The only time I was ever asked to be in charge of the committee, you know, to plan the whole thing. And we had a visiting speaker, and we had our Thai pastors come and be with us too to make some planning things that we were doing. And the speaker was from Houston, Texas. And he was going to be later a missionary in Vietnam, I think. But being in charge, I asked the president of our seminary, who was an elderly Thai pastor, to translate for this preacher. And he had translated some books, and he's very good in very literal kind of English. And these were theology textbooks for the seminary, and they were being used all the time. So I asked my friend, who I hate to admit I can't remember his name right now, but I asked him to translate for this visiting preacher. Well, he was a very humble fellow, and he didn't want. He was very reluctant to accept it. But I said, "Well, you're the oldest pastor, and you're the one that they all look up to." Ajahn Todd was his name, and he was a very cooperative fellow. We had heard him translate one other time that I remembered. We had had the president of the Southern Baptist Convention from Knoxville, Tennessee, came through Thailand back in 1959 when we were still in language school. And our mission group had a reception for him over in front of, out in the yard there at the seminary. And Ajahn Todd was going to be his translator. Well, brothers, whatever his last name was, I can't remember now. But he was really making us missionaries feel good because he was saying what wonderful people we were. And he said, I'm so proud to meet these dedicated, selfless, caring, wonderful, special. I mean, he was laying it on good people. And Ajahn Todd looked at him and he said, huh? Just like that. And I cracked up, of course, but Ajahn Todd finally, when things settled down, he he said that, and then he went on to translate. Well, I knew he could translate, you know. So there at the mission meeting in 75, he finally agreed. Well, our speaker, he was a good speaker, and he was talking about starting small groups and so on in your home and things like that, of reaching people. And he started out, he said, the part of the city where I work is a very poor section. And Ajahn Todd got that pretty good, and he said, the speaker said, the families where I work turn over several times a year. Well, Ajahn Todd was quiet for a second, and then he said, please say again. So the preacher said it again. He said, these families where I work, they turn over several times a year. Well, I can imagine what was going through our John Tott's head, seeing those people turning over, rolling around on the floor, I guess is what he was thinking. But finally, he didn't try to translate it. I was sitting on the front row, and Thai style with his fingers down, he beckoned for me to come up and take over. Well, of course, I did. I did the best I could. Uh, but we know what it meant. They moved around, they changed houses, and they weren't staying in the same place all the time. But Ajahn taught this was an expression that he never hadn't heard of before. And so sometimes, when you're charged of something, you have to get serious a little bit. Well, if I had time to think and write all those stories down about different things at Fun Night, I could think of more, but that hour's about up, isn't it, son? Yeah. Thank you for asking that good question, too. Nobody ever asked me that.